Well, as of today, Kano officially has reached Living Legend status and is no longer allowed in Blitz. And joining Icelander in that Blitz Living Legend status means that there's only one wizard left to play in the format, and you know it, you love it. It's Emperor time. So who is the Emperor and what does he do?
Who is your daddy and what does he do?
Well, let's break it down. The Emperor in all of his glory. Yes, I opened this card at the kitchen table, no less. The Emperor is a 4 intellect, 15 health wizard, royal, draconic, warrior, hero, young. I did not say that in the right order, but it does not matter. And he has this stipulation that says you may only have red cards in your deck. Action, pay 3, which is oftentimes difficult. Search your deck for Command and Conquer, attack with it, and then shuffle. This is the new warrior wizard that we're pivoting to. I've played around with Kano a lot, and it's sad to see him go, but now we're on the Emperor tech. So let's break down the deck and how it actually functions, starting with the weapon and equipment. Starting with Waning Moon, this is the de facto weapon, in my opinion, for the Emperor. It costs 2, you can play it at instant speed, but you have to have played a non-attack action card to attack with it. Nevertheless, it attacks for 2, or it deals 2 arcane damage to target hero. If you're doing it on your opponent's turn, it actually deals 3, and that is one of the methods of finishing out the game, is dealing 3 damage, along with Emeritus Scolding, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but it is the de facto weapon. Then we have Arcanite Skullcap because it represents 3 extra health, and our opponents are wanting to kill us very quickly. They are looking at the fact that we are squishy. We only have 15 health, and they're trying to punch us in the face a lot, so 3 extra health is nothing to scoff at. Flamescale Furnace, this makes the deck go, it makes the deck run. It is absolutely incredibly insane. Paying 1 to gain 1 for each red card in your pitch zone is huge, and it also blocks 3, so this is a natural shoe-in for the deck. Storm Striders, also natural shoe-in for the deck, because this is how we plan on reaching the kill threshold and actually killing our opponent most of the time. We don't get them to 0 health not via Storm Striders. It's this or bust, basically. We play Storm Striders because we want to win the game with them. Now, you may be asking, what do we use in the arm slot? Well, I'm going to hold up Metacarpus Node and tell you a little story. Once upon a time, at Worlds last year, I traded my only copy of Brave Forge Bracers to none other than Flake. And I said, I don't need this card right now. I'll pick one up later. And I never picked one up later. And, well, I need it for this. So you can play Metacarpus Node. I don't. The only time I do is against, like, Briar or Inset, because in doing so, it lets you block the rune chance sometimes. But that's the only time. I know you can activate this in response to Emeritus Scolding to give it +1, but oftentimes Brave Forge Bracers being a 3 block essentially just gives you an extra card in hand, gives you 3 extra health, whereas this deals 1 extra damage and pushes your threshold up for kills. It's not worth it, in my opinion. But I guess you can bring this in your sideboard. You can bring it in for, yeah, like rune chance. That's literally about it. So let's talk about the deck now. This is an interesting deck because the goal here is to get our opponent to 9. That's the goal. If we can get our opponent to 9 and then Arsenal Emeritus Scolding, we can win the game. It is oftentimes just what we are looking to do, but we're doing it off of the back of a variety of methods. And one of the cool things about this deck is that you can play just as many attack action cards as non-attack action cards, just as many attacks as you can wizard spells. And our opponents don't know what we're doing or how much AB they should bring, Arcane Barrier, or how much blocking equipment they should bring. So let's break down the attacks first. Yes, we are running the splashiest Command and Conquer I own because I found it and I pulled it, and so I put it in the deck. But we are running 2 Command and Conquer. Why? Because the effect does function, and oftentimes Command and Conquer is just really good. It blocks for 3, it attacks for 6, it costs 2, so we can get to it fairly easily off of some trickery, which I can explain in the Patreon, by the way. If you want to go check out the Patreon, there's going to be a guide up for this. But we have 2 of those. We have 2 Enlightened Strikes, which I have gone back and forth on being in the deck. just like I have with Dromai. This card comes out for me in Dromai, but in this, I think it's worth it. So we play the old 0 for 5 bottom a card. I have built this deck to be very defensive if it has to be. A lot of 3 blocks in this deck compared to what you could include. Like, we could include snatches. I did originally. We could include like belittle, minnowisms, overloads, and things like that. I said, nah, I want things that block 3, and Enlightened Strike blocks 3. So we run 2 of those. Ravenous Rabble does not block 3, but it's one of the best cards in the deck because it's a 0 for 4 go again, guaranteed. It's a chain starter. It acts just like it does in Dromai, which is probably why I love this deck so much, because it feels a lot like Dromai. In fact, I took these cards out of my Dromai deck. Sad day. Scar for a Scar. This card also only blocks 2. It's one of the only other ones that blocks 2, but it almost always is your chain starter because we start with tiny amounts of life. In fact, we start with the least amount of life in the game now that Kano's gone. So this always has go again on turn 0, which means we can attack for 4 and then just keep on trucking. Continuing on the 2-block train, sadly, we have Life for a Life. This one cost 1, but oftentimes that's okay. Like, we're okay to pitch into this because it sets up our Flame Scale Furnace. When you pitch something into your pitch zone, then you can Flame Scale Furnace with a second card, gain 2 resources. That's quite good. This also gives us 1 health gain, which is quite good, and it oftentimes has go again because, again, we're a squishy wizard. So we're okay with the 2 blocks there. Continuing on with 2-block train, we have Blaze Headlong. Yes, we have to run the splashy cards because we're the Emperor and we have to show off our bling. But Blaze Headlong is one of those cards that just says go, go, go. And we're almost out of the 2-block train. Almost everything after this to this point, very close to this point, blocks 3. But this is definitely worth making the concession to block 2 so that we can send 4 damage with go again. Now you're looking at Wounding Blow, and you're like, why in the world is Wounding Blow in the deck? Well, duh, it blocks for 3. In fact, one of the core components of this deck, one of the core philosophies of this deck is playing to your arsenal. And this is a fantastic arsenal card because what it does when you put it in arsenal, it says you can block with your entire hand and still send damage to your opponent's face. Because this is a 0 for 4, you don't have to pay for it. And in a pinch, it can also just be a 3-block. Yes, it does not have go again. I understand that, but it's also really cool. Look at that guy. He's really cool. Flame Call Awakening, 2 copies plus the Phoenix Flame. This is the sort of decision point. This is like a toolbox card. If you don't like this, you don't have to run it. This to me is still, I'm a little on the fence of, because it's 2 2-blocks and a 0-block. And sometimes you draw this card and then you hate everything when you draw this card. So for me, this is still a little bit of on the fence and testing, but I literally played 20 games of this deck today, just today. I'm recording this on Thursday. I've played like 33 games thus far with this list, and it performs well enough, particularly on Tome of Imperial Flame turns, that we just leave it in the deck. So right now, this is on that sort of chopping block, these 3 cards here. We could change this up, but we use these attacks to soften up our opponent. We're asking them if they want to block. We're asking them if they want to take damage or if they want to, give us cards. If they give us cards, we're happy because then we can play a more proactive game plan. But we are oftentimes leaking damage over the top with this stack of cards. These are all of our arcane damage spells, and they are incredibly important to the deck because this is oftentimes how we kill our opponent, particularly because our opponents don't know how much arcane barrier to bring into the matchup. Because this deck, in your meta, if people are bringing a ton of arcane, this deck can pivot. You can take out a lot of these cards. In fact, I'll tell you which ones to take out. But if your, meta is not bringing arcane barrier to the tournaments that you're going and playing in, well, guess what? You can just play all of these cards and feel really happy and laugh all the way to the bank. So first things first, let's talk about Emeritus Scolding. It's the best arcane damage finisher that we have in the deck for most matchups. We run 2 of these, and yes, I did get them signed at Worlds because duh, we're trying to flex here. This is the card you put into your arsenal. This is the card you activate Stormstriders in order to play. The goal here is to pay 1 to activate Stormstriders, play this from our arsenal, paying 2 with 1 card left over in our hand. Send this for 6 damage because it's on our opponent's turn, at which point we will then activate Flame Scale Furnace, so make sure you don't blow up your Flame Scale Furnace. We will then, after that resolves, gain 3 resources because we've pitched 3 things into our pitch zone that are red, and then finally we'll send the Waning Moon at our opponent for a total of 9 arcane damage on their turn. So the kill threshold for this deck is 9. We just need to get our opponent to 9 and have no recourse for them to pitch into Arcane Barrier. If we get them lower, we feel even better. If they've expended their hand, we feel even better than that. Yes, you can push this to 10 off of the back of Metacarpus Node, but again, I don't think it's really that worth it to go from 9 to 10. Because you're losing out on Brave Forge Bracer's value. So this is the kill card. You put it in the arsenal. You can play it from hand, but it's way better in the arsenal. That's where it belongs. So this is probably the best arcane damage spell that we have in the deck that doesn't kill our opponent. Reverberate is insane, and it's specifically insane into most decks that run Arcane Barrier 2. If your meta is running Arcane Barrier 3 consistently, this card should be changed out of the deck completely because we have no way of buffing it. Crucible of Aetherweave is gone. That might be super interesting to play, but we don't have access to it anymore. So this is a really powerful card in Arcane Barrier 2 or 1 because it deals 3, and then we can banish a card from our hand that has resource cost less than what it deals, and in doing so we can then play it at instant speed. What does this mean? Well, we can play Reverberate for 3 damage, which we would love to do, and then play any of these 0 cost cards, of which we run 6 in the main deck. Okay, any of these cards can be played for 3 damage. So we can play Sap for 3 damage, and that totals to 6. We can play Prognosticate for 3 damage, and that totals to 6 again. We can play Aether Dart for 3 damage. And these are guaranteed plays. Why? Because if our opponent is playing Arcane Barrier 2, then Reverberate is always going to hit unless they have Brush Off or they waste Oasis Respite, which everyone's starting to cut in the format. So Reverberate, quite good because it nets us 6 damage across 2 cards from our hand. And then if you somehow have more resources available to you, you might even be able to squeeze in a nice little Waning Moon on the back. But it's not the only thing you can activate it on, because if you have resources for it, you can actually go Reverberate into Aether Quickening as I bump the microphone. And this play is insanely good because Aether Quickening, we run 2 of them, deals 4 arcane damage. So we can actually send 7 arcane off of the back of 1, 2, 3, 4 cards. If one of these is in arsenal, feels quite good because then we play Reverberate, pitching a red, then we can pitch 1 more red to activate our Flamescale Furnace and have the resources to play Aether Quickening, or just pitch that other red to play Aether Quickening. And we do indeed play 2 Aether Quickenings because 4 arcane damage just straight up for 1 card is quite good. Speaking of 4 arcane damage, we also do the same thing with Scalding Rain. We run 2 copies of Scalding Rain red. And then we do indeed run the big boys. I think these are incredibly useful and necessary for the deck as well. They are quite expensive, but it does mean that you can go something like, 1 attack or a 1 cost attack into Flamescale Furnace, into Swell Tidings, or into Voltic Bolt. So we run 2 Swell Tidings, 2 Voltic Bolts, so that we can send 5 arcane damage at our opponent. Now, be very aware, because we can send 5 arcane damage in a variety of ways. We can technically send 5 arcane damage off of the back of any of these 0 cost deal 3s and a Waning Moon activation. So that is another way to send arcane damage in, sort of packets of 5. But this is 1 packet of 5, whereas the other one is sort of 2 packets of total of 5. So our opponent can pay around Arcane Barrier the other way easier. This is 1 big chunk, 1 chungus. I don't know if that's an appropriate word, but I'm going to use it anyway. And then finally, we have some kind of splashy toolbox cards. First of all, Tome of Imperial Flame has made this deck so much better. You can literally play this in almost every form that you possibly would want to. So Tome of Imperial Flame is quite good because it can draw us into a bunch of attacks and we're happy. It can draw us into a bunch of spells and we're also pretty happy because when we pitch 2 for this, it sets us up to play Voltic Bolt or it sets us up to play like Waning Moon activation, because keep in mind, this is a non-attack action card. So even on a threadbare hand where this was the only card you kept, guess what you can do? Play Tome of Imperial Flame, pitch the 2 reds that you draw because you're guaranteed to draw 2 reds, Waning Moon for 2. So this is still a 0 for 2 in the worst, case scenarios. So this card, quite good in the deck. I play 1 copy of Nimblism. It falls on literally every attack that we play except Command and Conquer. I would like to play a second one, but I would have to cut some things to do that, and I'm not sure what to cut. And then finally, 2 Sink Belows. Yeah, that's a pink Sink Below with foiling. Wow, so fancy. But yes, we play 2 Sink Belows, and it's super useful in the deck. 1, because it's useful, it's just a useful card in general, but 2, because it allows us to dig away a 2-block card for one of our many 3-block cards. So this card is oftentimes a 0 for 5 because it can filter our hand away from 2 blocks into 3 blocks. Now you might be wondering, well, what's in the inventory, the sideboard that now exists in Blitz? Well, there's a couple of things. I threw 2 more Fate for Scenes in because I copped out. I couldn't think of what else to put in there. Technically, that's not true. I had Give and Take in this slot, and I was never citing it in, so I was like, I'll just throw in more Fate for Scenes. Why not? But then I ran into a couple of Fatigue decks, specifically Yoji, and I don't know, and technically Fatigue Briar, and I don't know if there's a way for us to win those matchups ever, but I figured this is one possibility. So we're going to play a random combo of Blessing of Aether times 2. You have to use your Storm Striders in activation after the first one, but you're going to stack these up on your turn. Then you're going to end up like passing or Waning Mooning or whatever you want to do. But essentially, you're going to play these down, and when they pop, you're going to find a copy of Forked Lightning in your arsenal, and you're going to jam down Forked Lightning. And this technically is the combo that you would play Metacarpus Node with, so that you can buff it again, because I believe, if my memory serves correct, you can indeed take your entire hand. If this Forked Lightning is in arsenal, you can pitch the you can pitch 3 and then activate the Flame Scale, and then gain 3, and then you can activate the Metacarpus and still be able to send the Waning Moon as well. But this pushes a lot of damage because these Blessing of Aether, I play too much Kano. This Blessing of Aether says at the start of your turn, destroy it. The next card you play this turn has an arcane damage effect. Instead, it deals that much plus 3. And the way Forked Lightning works, that no one ever plays because it's too expensive, Forked Lightning says deal 2 damage to 2 arcane damage to target hero, and then do it again. And if you add a modifier to one of these, you add it to both. So if we play 2 Blessings and they both activate, 2 Blessings activate at the start of a turn, this gives plus 3 and then plus 3. So we look at this, and it deals 16 damage. And then if you put a Metacarpus Node buff on, it deals 18 damage. And then if you send Waning Moon, it deals 20 damage on a turn. And yeah, it's pie in the sky, but honestly, I don't know any other way to beat like a Yoji. Fatigue Yoji just kind of feels real bad into this deck. Maybe just splitting, I don't know. Give and take, I don't know. Nevertheless, this deck is doing quite well for me. Just today alone, I have a 61% win rate against people on Talishar, which, I mean, take it as what it is, but there are a lot of people playing this new format and trying to get this thing figured out with all these heroes rotating. And you know what? I, for one, am here for it because Emperor is cool. And if you enjoy things like this and you want more info about this deck, check out the Patreon, because I'm going to post a guide and this link to this list. Otherwise, you can just check the basic list that I have down in the comments section and in the description. But if you enjoy this type of content and you want to see more of this type of content, then make that number go slightly higher so that we can make it go up to a 4. Because 4s are way cooler than 3s. So I've been told by people on the internet. As always, everybody, thanks for watching.